introduction and character introduction. High in the snow-covered Austrian Alps lies the peaceful village of Edelbruck, a place famous for its frozen lake, glowing lanterns, and magical winters. Every year, when the first snowfall covers the village, an old legend comes to life. The villagers say that winter has a strange way of bringing lost souls back together. This story follows Adrien Moreau, a talented photographer from France who returns to Edelbruck every winter without knowing why, and Clara Weiss, a gifted violinist from Austria who has been drawn to the same village every December since childhood. Although they have no memory of ever meeting before, they feel an unexplainable connection the moment they see each other. As they spend time together, they begin uncovering mysterious memories, a forgotten promise, and a secret hidden beneath the snow for more than 20 years. This is not just a love story, it is a journey of destiny, forgotten memories, and the belief that some promises are so powerful that even time cannot erase them. The first snowfall of December arrived earlier than expected that year. Soft white flakes drifted silently through the mountain air, covering the rooftops of Edelbruck in a blanket of fresh snow. The village slowly transformed into a winter painting, its streets glowing beneath rows of golden lanterns while the scent of roasted chestnuts and cinnamon filled the crisp evening air. Adrien stepped off the evening train, carrying nothing more than a camera bag and a small leather suitcase. The station master smiled as he stamped Adrien's ticket. "You've come back." Adrien paused. "I suppose I have. You always do." The old station master smiled knowingly but said nothing more. Adrien found the comment strange. He had visited Edelbruck several times before, but hearing those words felt different somehow. It sounded less like a welcome and more like someone acknowledging a tradition. As he walked through the village, familiar places stirred emotions he couldn't explain. The old bakery, the frozen fountain, the narrow streets lined with evergreen trees. Everything felt familiar, far more familiar than it should have. He quietly whispered to himself, "Why does this place feel like home?" Meanwhile, several kilometers away, another train slowly climbed through the snow-covered mountains. Inside sat Clara Weiss, gazing silently through the frosted window. Her violin rested beside her seat. Every year, she asked herself the same question. Why do I keep coming back? She had tried skipping the trip once. Only once. That winter, she couldn't sleep for days. She dreamed of falling snow, an old wooden bridge, and a pair of blue eyes waiting for her somewhere in the mountains. When spring finally arrived, the dreams disappeared. From that moment onward, she never missed another winter. The following morning, the village square came alive with music and laughter. Children built snowmen, while tourists wandered through rows of Christmas stalls decorated with lights and evergreen wreaths. Vendors sold hot chocolate, handmade ornaments, and fresh pastries. Adrien wandered through the market with his camera, photographing everything that caught his eye. Just as he raised his lens toward the frozen lake, someone accidentally bumped into him. His camera slipped from his hands. Before it hit the ground, another pair of hands caught it. "I'm so sorry," a gentle voice said. Adrien looked up. Standing before him was a woman wrapped in a long, cream-colored winter coat. Snowflakes rested softly in her dark hair, and her bright green eyes reflected the morning sunlight. For a few seconds, neither of them spoke. It wasn't because they were surprised. It was because both of them felt something impossible. Recognition, not the kind that comes from remembering a face, the kind that comes from remembering a feeling, as if they had been searching for each other without ever knowing it. Clara smiled first. "I think this belongs to you." Adrien accepted the camera. "Thank you." There was an awkward silence. Then, almost at the same moment, they both laughed. "I feel like we've met before," Adrien admitted. Clara looked down for a moment. "So do I." Neither could explain why. Over the next few hours, they explored the Christmas market together. Neither of them had planned it. The conversation simply flowed naturally, as though they had paused it only yesterday. They spoke about travel, photography, music, and their favorite places in Europe. Adrian admitted that Paris had never felt as peaceful as these mountains. Clara confessed that although she had performed before thousands of people, she always felt happiest playing her violin beside the frozen lake. The afternoon passed so quickly that neither noticed the sun beginning to disappear behind the mountains. As evening approached, they arrived at the old wooden bridge overlooking the frozen lake. The village lights reflected beautifully across the ice. Without thinking, Adrian rested his hand on the bridge railing. A strange feeling washed over him. For just a brief second, a memory flashed through his mind. Two small children, standing on this very bridge, laughing, building tiny snowmen, one of them holding a silver compass. Then the memory vanished. Adrian stepped back. "What is it?" Clara asked. He rubbed his forehead. "I don't know. I suddenly remembered something, but I don't think it was my memory." Clara's expression changed. Very slowly, she reached into the pocket of her winter coat. Without saying a word, she removed a small silver compass. Its surface was scratched with age. The moment Adrian saw it, his heart skipped a beat. He didn't know why. He had never seen the compass before. And yet, some part of him knew their story had begun long before this winter. Adrian couldn't take his eyes off the silver compass resting in Clara's hand. It wasn't expensive or beautifully decorated. Its edges were worn, the glass was slightly cracked, and the metal had darkened with age. Yet something about it felt strangely familiar, as though it belonged to a forgotten chapter of his life. "You've seen this before, haven't you?" Clara asked quietly. Adrian hesitated. "I don't know. I've never owned one like it. But when I look at it, it feels like it's been waiting for me." Clara smiled sadly. "That's exactly how I feel." She gently closed the compass and slipped it back into her coat pocket. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Snow continued falling around them, covering the wooden bridge in a soft white blanket. Then Adrian asked, "How long have you been coming to Edelbrook?" Clara looked toward the frozen lake before answering. 21 winters. Adrian's expression froze. "So have I." They both laughed nervously. "What are the chances?" Adrian joked. But neither of them truly believed it was a coincidence. The next morning, Adrian woke earlier than usual. Thick snow covered the village, and the rooftops shimmered beneath the pale winter sun. He couldn't stop thinking about the compass or the strange memory that had appeared on the bridge. Instead of visiting the Christmas market, he decided to explore the oldest part of Edelbrook. Hidden behind the village church stood a small building with a wooden sign that read, "The Museum of Winter Memories Curious." Adrian stepped inside. The museum was quiet. Dust floated through the warm sunlight streaming from the windows. Inside were old photographs, antique sleds, handwritten journals, and faded maps showing how Edelbrook had changed over the centuries. An elderly woman arranged old postcards behind the front desk. She smiled warmly. "You must be Adrian." He blinked in surprise. "I'm sorry, have we met?" The woman chuckled softly. "No, but I've been expecting you." A strange silence filled the room. "You've been expecting me?" She nodded. "And Clara." Adrian's heart skipped a beat. "How do you know her?" The woman slowly walked toward an old wooden cabinet and removed a large leather photo album. Without saying another word, she placed it gently on the table. "Perhaps it's time." Adrian carefully opened the album. Most photographs showed the village during different winters over the last 100 years. Families, snow festivals, frozen lakes, children building snowmen. Then, one photograph made him stop breathing. It showed two children sitting on the old wooden bridge. A little boy. A little girl. The boy held a small silver compass. The girl laughed beside him. The photograph was dated December 18, 2003, Adrian stared at the little boy's face. His eyes widened. It looks like me. The old woman nodded. It is you. Adrian looked at the little girl. And Clara? Yes, his hands began to shake. That's impossible. I've never met her before this winter. The old woman slowly closed the album. You don't remember because neither of you was meant to. She introduced herself as Margareta, the village historian. For decades, she had preserved Edelbrook's history, recording every important event that took place in the mountains. There was an accident, she said quietly, 22 years ago. A train carrying dozens of families crossed the mountains during the first heavy snowfall. The bridge collapsed. Adrian felt his chest tighten. The rescue lasted all night. Many survived. But 2 children were trapped beneath the ice. Their hearts stopped. He whispered, 2 children. Margareta nodded. You and Clara. Silence filled the museum. Snow tapped gently against the windows. The doctors brought you both back. Everyone called it a miracle. But after that winter, you never saw each other again. Adrian closed his eyes. Tiny fragments of memory flashed through his mind. Cold water. Someone crying. A small hand reaching toward him. Then darkness. That evening, Adrian found Clara beside the frozen lake. She was playing her violin as snow drifted around her. The melody was beautiful, yet strangely familiar. When she finished, Adrian quietly asked, "Who taught you that song?" She lowered her violin. "I don't know. I've played it since I was a child. I've never seen the sheet music. It simply exists in my memory." Adrian slowly smiled. "I know it too." Without thinking, he softly hummed the final notes. Clara looked at him in complete shock. How? I've never heard anyone else sing that melody. Neither of them realized it. The tune wasn't famous. It had never been published. It was the lullaby rescue workers had sung to calm the frightened children during the blizzard 22 years earlier. Neither Adrian nor Clara remembered the night. But somehow, their hearts had remembered the music. Over the following days, they spent every waking hour together. They walked through snow-covered forests, shared coffee in quiet cafes, watched the northern stars reflect across the frozen lake. With every conversation, they felt less like strangers. Sometimes they finished each other's sentences. Sometimes they laughed before the other had spoken. It was as if their friendship had simply continued after a very long pause. Yet both of them noticed something strange. Every evening, just before sunset, the silver compass began to move. Its needle no longer pointed north. Instead, it slowly turned toward the old wooden bridge. Every single day, at exactly the same time. On the 7th evening, curiosity finally overcame them. Together, they walked toward the bridge carrying only a lantern and the compass. The village had become unusually quiet. Snow fell gently from the sky. As they reached the center of the bridge, the compass needle suddenly began spinning wildly. Then, it stopped, pointing directly toward the frozen lake below. A powerful gust of icy wind swept across the bridge. Without warning, the ice beneath the lake shimmered. For just a few seconds, the surface became as clear as glass. Deep beneath the frozen water, they saw 2 tiny figures. A frightened little boy, a crying little girl, holding hands beneath the ice, exactly where the train had crashed 22 years earlier. Clara gasped. "No," Adrian whispered. "Those are—" Before either of them could finish the sentence, the vision vanished. The ice returned to normal. The compass suddenly snapped shut on its own. Neither of them spoke. Because for the first time, they realized something impossible. They hadn't been returning to Edelbrook every winter by choice. Something had been calling them home. Adrian and Clara remained standing on the old wooden bridge long after the vision had disappeared. The snow continued to fall in complete silence, covering their footprints as though the mountain itself wanted to erase what they had just witnessed. Neither of them spoke, not because they had nothing to say, but because they were both afraid that speaking might make the vision real. Finally, Clara broke the silence. "That wasn't a dream," Adrian slowly nodded. "No, it was a memory." They both looked toward the frozen lake. Somewhere beneath the thick layer of ice, the past was still waiting. The next morning, Adrian and Clara returned to the village museum. Margareta was already waiting for them. Before either of them could ask a question, she quietly placed an old newspaper on the table. The headline read, "Two children saved after deadly alpine train disaster." The article described the accident that had taken place on December 18th, 2003. Rescuers had worked through the night in freezing temperatures. Dozens of passengers had been saved, but two children had been trapped beneath the broken bridge after the train slid into the frozen lake. According to the report, both children had been declared clinically dead for nearly 3 minutes before doctors managed to revive them. Margareta gently closed the newspaper. People believed the story ended there, but it didn't. She reached beneath the desk and removed a small wooden box. Inside lay another silver compass. It looked almost identical to Clara's, except its needle had stopped moving forever. Margareta smiled sadly. There were originally two. One belonged to Adrian, the other belonged to Clara. When rescuers found you beneath the ice, you were holding them. Adrian frowned. "I've never owned a compass." "You don't remember," Margareta replied softly. "But before the train crossed the mountains, another child on board gave you one. He said if we ever get lost, the compass will help us find each other." For a long moment, the room was silent. Then Adrian quietly asked, "What happened to my compass?" Margareta looked toward the window. It was never found. That afternoon, the snowfall became heavier than anyone expected. The villagers hurried indoors. Old church bells echoed through Edelbrook. Margareta suddenly looked worried. "It's happening earlier this year." Clara looked confused. "What is?" Margareta answered in a trembling voice. "The last snowfall." She explained that according to an old village tradition, every 22nd winter after the accident, the mountain would offer one final chance for two separated souls to complete the promise they never remembered making. If they failed, the connection between them would disappear forever. They would continue living their lives, but they would never meet again. Not in winter, not anywhere. Their memories would slowly fade until they became strangers once more. That evening, Adrian and Clara returned to the bridge for what they feared might be the last time. Snow covered everything. The village lights reflected beautifully across the frozen lake. The air was completely still. Clara reached into her pocket and removed her silver compass. Without warning, it began glowing with a soft blue light. The needle spun wildly before pointing toward the center of the lake. At the same moment, a crack echoed beneath the ice. Not a dangerous crack, but one that formed a perfect path stretching from the bridge across the frozen lake. Almost like an invitation. Neither of them spoke. Together, they stepped onto the ice. Every step felt strangely familiar, as though they had walked this path once before. Halfway across the lake, the wind suddenly stopped. The snowfall froze in midair. Time itself seemed to stand still. Before them, two small children appeared. A little boy wearing a blue scarf, a little girl holding a wooden music box. They were no older than 8 years old. The children smiled. They were Adrian and Clara. Not ghosts, not spirits, but the memories of who they had once been. The little boy held out something shining beneath the snow. Adrian knelt down. His hands uncovered an old silver compass buried beneath the ice. His compass. The one that had disappeared 22 years earlier. The moment he touched it, everything returned. The train, the blizzard, the freezing water, the fear. And finally, one forgotten promise. As rescue workers struggled to reach them beneath the broken bridge, the frightened children had held each other's hands. The little Clara had whispered through tears, "If we both survive, let's meet here every winter." The little Adrian had smiled weakly. "Even if we forget?" She nodded. "Our hearts won't." The vision slowly faded. Snow began falling again. Time moved once more. Adrian looked at Clara. Both of them were crying, not from sadness, but because, after 22 years, they finally remembered. Months passed. For the first time in their lives, neither of them returned to their separate cities alone. Adrian left France. Clara reduced her concert schedule. Together, they bought a small cottage overlooking the frozen lake in Edelbrook. The villagers smiled every time they saw them. The old legend had finally reached its ending. Every winter, Adrian photographed the first snowfall. Every evening, Clara played her violin beside the lake. Life became beautifully ordinary. And for them, that was the greatest miracle of all. 25 years later, the couple had grown old together. Their hair had turned silver. Their hands carried the gentle marks of time. But every December 18th, they still walked to the old wooden bridge, still carried the 2 silver compasses, still watched the snow fall across the frozen lake. One quiet winter evening, Adrian smiled at Clara. "Do you ever wonder, what would have happened if we hadn't remembered?" Clara gently held his hand. "I don't. Because somehow, I think we would have found each other anyway." Adrian smiled. "So do I." Years later, after both Adrian and Clara had peacefully passed away, the people of Edelbrook noticed something unusual. Every first snowfall of winter, 2 sets of footprints appeared across the frozen lake before anyone entered it. The footprints always began at the old wooden bridge, walked side by side, never separated, and disappeared into the falling snow. No one ever discovered who made them, but every child in the village grew up hearing the same story: that love isn't always about finding someone. Sometimes it's about remembering a promise your heart made long before your mind ever could. Final narration: some people believe destiny is written in the stars. Others believe it is created by the choices we make. But perhaps the strongest promises are the ones we don't remember making. Because real love doesn't always survive through memory. Sometimes it survives through time itself. And if you ever visit a quiet village in the Austrian Alps during the first snowfall, look carefully at the old wooden bridge. If you see 2 people walking across the frozen lake, hand in hand, don't call out to them. Some promises are still finding their way home.